Great.
No,
Brett?
Sophie, hi.
Hi, guys.
It's
Okay.
like a reunion.
Hey, Sophie. All right.
So SuiteCX is proud to join in on one day with a live interview of the founders of one-to-one marketing. Don and Martha are here. It's and they look exactly like those pictures there, which is really great. So in 1993, Don Peppers and Martha Rogers, Ph.D., introduced the concept of one-to-one marketing in their book, The One-to-One Future, Building Relationships One Customer at a Time. Written 2 years, the World Wide Web provided businesses with ubiquitous interactivity, who knew? And Business Week called their book the Bible of the New Marketing. While Inc. magazine's editor-in-chief called it one of the 2 or 3 most important business books ever written, Don and Martha went on to write 10 more books, and I have them all in my bookshelf to date, and their books have collectively sold more than 1 million copies in 18 languages around the globe. Their work continues to focus on the customer experience and its related topics, which range from digital technology, disruption, innovation, customer metrics, social selling, customer success, customer advocacy, trustability, and corporate culture. 20 years, can you believe it? After the founding, the management consulting firm Peppers and Rogers Group, they created CX Speakers, a company that delivers workshops, keynote presentations, and thought leadership consulting focused on customer experience topics. Both Don and Martha are also very active as board members at SuiteCX, where we benefit from their advice, knowledge, and luminary information. So I'm going to introduce Don and Martha now, and we're going to ask them a few questions. Don, you want to say hi, Martha?
Hello.
Yep,
Hello.
guys.
Hello. Hey. Hello,
Great to-
everybody.
And thanks, Valerie, for doing this.
Great. Well, it's kind of fun. So we're going to put them on the spot and ask them a few questions around the predictions that came true from that seminal book.
You know, Don and I met 30 years ago this month, and we were trying to figure out, Don was doing all kinds of work in this area, and I was trying to talk about it at the university. And we were trying to think about how technology would profoundly change business strategy. And so we came up with 10 predictions. And Don, how did we do on our 10 predictions?
Well, I guess it depends on which 10 you're talking about.
I'm talking about the ones in the one-to-one future, you know.
They're actually the chapter titles of the book. Each chapter title is a prediction, practically.
Right, that's right.
Well, I think the prediction that we scored the highest on probably is the title of chapter 8. Take products to customers, not customers to products. We talked about the rise of e-commerce, which at that time was not a word. And of course, the economy has swung radically towards e-commerce, especially with the COVID crisis. Many of our other predictions were sorts of predicting different types of business model.
Yeah, you know, the truth is that the very first chapter prediction was share of customer, not just market share. And then collaborate with customers and look for complaint discovery and differentiate customers and not just products, and economies of scope, more information about each customer instead of just economies of scale where you know more about all customers, and manage customers and not just products. So, and the list goes on. So I think we did pretty well. And out of 10, I think we could really, we can probably claim okay on 9 of them. And remember that when the book came out, there wasn't really an internet yet. So
no.
So
we also made some interesting predictions that didn't make chapter titles. In our final chapter on society at light speed, we predicted social media with we used the term image tribes. We talked about, which would basically, if you read the description of an image tribe, it's exactly the same as what a Facebook group is today. We predicted the gig economy, the gig economy. We predicted that, and we called it telecommuting and small, hunting and gathering. We would return to hunting, and you'd eat as well as you could hunt, and we predicted the whole issue of remote work. We said instead of the haves and have-nots, the world will be divided into the theirs and their nots, people who had to be there to do their job somewhere, and people who didn't have to be there. So all those.
It's interesting because now we call the their people the essential workers. And we also predicted at that time there might eventually not be enough work, but that's been talked about a lot more since then by a lot of people.
Right. We didn't get one thing right, at least not yet. One of our predictions, we made a big, bold prediction in chapter 9.
They were all big, bold predictions then.
Yeah. But it hasn't come true. And although I think it's a question of time, I think we're just too early for it yet.
That's right.
And that has to do with privacy.
Ah.
Yeah. Well, making money protecting privacy, not just.
Title of our chapter 9 is Make Money Protecting Privacy, Not Threatening It. But the truth is, most companies make money threatening privacy now or invading it rampantly. And that's quite true of big tech. Even very customer-centric companies like Amazon are accused of, abusing customers' personal information. We had a model for how interactivity would happen in our heads. We were thinking that the world would become more interactive as technology developed, but that it would require host companies somehow, that you couldn't, there wouldn't, we didn't visualize the owned by everybody internet. We visualized that it would be a big company like America Online, or should we say somebody like a telecom company, or maybe several different telecom companies, and that you would connect with them, you'd interact with others, and that because you went through them, they would be able to protect your privacy. In fact, it'd be in their interest to protect your privacy. They'd want to be able to sell your needs and wants to vendors without your identity, so that your privacy would be protected, and they would be able to participate in the business model. That's kind of the business model we thought, and it was not the business model that developed.
Did you ever think something like Alexa would happen?
No, we didn't say that specifically, although I do remember in an early speech I made based on the book, I remember saying to people that this is the last decade, in the 90s, this is the last decade when you will, you won't be able to talk to your refrigerator and tell it what to get.
Oh yeah, so yeah, I think that's probably right. But I think that also the privacy issue is far from gelled, and I think that's going to be more generational than we expect, because I'm very uncomfortable having Alexa in the house, whereas my son thinks it's the greatest thing in the world because it's so convenient.
Sure.
And so it's going to be when the rest of us get over ourselves by dying off, then a lot of these things will come to pass, or maybe they won't, but we'll see.
Well, as Niels Bohr once said about progress in the space of physics, he said, physics progresses one funeral at a time. And I would say business progresses one bankruptcy at a time.
Yeah, you know what? That's true for so many things.
Yeah. We ought to talk a little more detail about some of these earlier predictions. So, for instance, we thought of economies of scope rather than economies of scale. That's what we called it, scope. And we said that in the one-to-one future, instead of your profit margin going up with your market share, it would go up much more radically with your share of customer, because the more you sell to a big market of companies, of customers, the less you have to charge for your product, because you have to sell it to the next person who didn't want to buy it at the last price, right? You have to, so you squeeze your price down until it's your marginal cost, and that's your equilibrium. That's basically in economics 101, right?
Right.
But we said if you're selling to a single customer, the more you sell to a particular customer, the easier it is to sell to that customer. So that creates, that inverts that economies of scale into what become, increasing economies of scope, the more customer specific your marketing efforts were.
The more the scope of your data is on that particular customer and
Right.
you use it, then the cost of selling the next thing is even smaller. So,
Right.
way. Yeah.
And I think that that issue is something I talk to companies about all the time, even today. They, these days, people talk about product centric or customer centric. When we wrote the book, we were thinking mass marketing or one-to-one marketing. It's the same basic distinction, because product centric businesses aren't really concerned with customers. They're just managing their products, manufacturing their products, trying to get them out to as many people, as many customers as they can find. Whereas a one-to-one marketer is thinking about the customer and trying to find the next product or service for that customer.
So that talks to the rise of e-commerce, where you're taking products to customers versus customers to products. So
Yes.
what do you think of that?
And
Well,
why,
go ahead.
I was saying, and why we should all be investing in cardboard stock, but yeah, I think that what we're seeing, and not just because of elevated needs for COVID, is that that people don't want to have to do all the work anymore. They want to be able to do that work at their own convenience and in their own time, and in that way have everything brought to them. This gives the economies of scale of information a big chance and a big edge.
Do you think
Right.
that across all industries, or is it some are better than others?
I saw that. Thanks, Julia, for the question. It's a good question.
That's a great question. Yeah.
And it definitely, customizing to individual customers is definitely easier the more digital your business is. Google serves a different search engine to every single Google user, right? Based on that particular user's previous searches. But we were talking also, we were at least visualizing how companies might customize physical products. And we didn't coin the term mass customization, we called it customerization. But almost simultaneously with the one-to-one future, Joe Pine and Jim Gilmore came out with their book, Mass Customization, which was a really good primer on how you can digitally configure modules, using modules, different products.
I've forgotten that, Don, that we used the term customerization, and then as soon as that appeared in our book, some company ran off and trademarked it. And so that was where our big trademark efforts began, was wait a minute, they can take it away from us. Yeah. So
how many domains do you own, Martha? I can't remember. It was
yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
That's just, I have a little library.
But Joe Pine actually lived not far from me in Connecticut, and then we had coffee, and he started talking, and we began to collaborate, Martha and I and Joe, and it was our idea to write an article for Harvard Business Review, but he did most of the work in putting it together, truthfully told, on basically one of the advantages that when you combine one-to-one marketing and mass customization, true customizing for individual customers, you can have a learning relationship where the relationship, we called it a learning relationship because at the time a big best-selling book was the Learning Enterprise. the learning company. What was it? Learning organizations.
The knowledge organization or the learning. Yeah.
Yeah, I forget the name of the guy who he came up with this idea of an organization that gets smarter and smarter. We said, well, this relationship gets smarter and smarter because the more you tell me about how to, customize my product for you, the more loyal you're going to be. Because even if you wanted it somewhere else from some other vendor who does the same level of customization, you have to first reteach them what you've already taught me. So we came out with that HBR article in, about 4 years after the one-to-one future was out.
So Google's eliminated cookies. There's interesting, again, Martha, you talked about your kids not caring about privacy, but Google is set to get rid of cookies in 2022. What's going to be the replacement for all of that so people can do one-to-one?
Well, the truth is that when they talk about eliminate cookies, they're not talking about eliminating the ones where I choose to have something done. In fact, I was talking the other day about how I had to do something. I'm trying to sign up for COVID vaccinations, and the people at the other end said, well, this is not a problem. You just have to eliminate all your cookies, and then the website that we're trying to send you can go through. And I said, okay, well, wait a minute. I don't want to eliminate all these cookies because these are direct relationships between me and the companies I want to do business with. That's so different from Google or somebody else just sort of picking up everything that I leave behind me in a breadcrumb trail. And I do think that we will come to see a huge difference between those. I'll give you permission to put my cookies on, put your cookies on my machine. Sounds dirty, but the truth is that we will probably
only you would come up with that, Martha.
Thank you.
Sounds dirty.
Well, Deanna says first-party data is and device ID are going to be the next thing, and of course there's beacons and all the other things. So you want to talk a little bit about privacy being the difference, Martha, between it being intimate versus creepy?
Right, the difference between intimacy and creepiness. I remember back in the early 2000s when I was talking to a woman in Canada Bell at Rogers Telecommunications, no relation, unfortunately. But she said, here in Canada, I know where everybody is when they make a call. I know whom they're calling. I know how long it lasts. I know whether or not we inadvertently drop them. I know so much about these people, and there's so much I could do for them. Now, help me, Peppers and Rogers Group, figure out how to help my customers and do more things for them without freaking them out. And of course, we've come a long way since then. But that's really the dilemma: is how do we not make it creepy while we're making it effective? And that sort of makes me think that it's time for us to think about 30 years ago, because when we met 30 years ago and we started working on this, it's been almost 30 years since the first book came out.
We started faxing back and forth.
We started faxing, and every day we had to run over to the post office and mail little discs that to get floppy disks, because that was the only way overnight. It was expensive to write a book together because we had to do that, and that was a long time ago. But what we realize now is that there are now new technologies that, just as there was a suite of technologies that drove the one-to-one future in our thinking for the next 20 years, that there are now new suites of technologies that make it necessary for us to think about how those technologies are affecting business. So I guess that's the next set of predictions, right, Don?
Yeah, questions. John Johnson said IBM introduced Watson almost 10 years ago, and it was winning against humans in Jeopardy. So what technologies do you think affect businesses and their strategy today? Because there has been this constant fear that technology is going to take jobs away, or what's going to happen here?
Well, first of all, that kind of technology will take jobs away, and we are going to have to figure out what we want humans to do. And the only way to be successful at that is to figure out what humans can do that no technology can. So one of the things that Don spends a great deal of time talking about is how humanity reigns even within the technology, so that more and more what the technology does is it accommodates it is able to be trained perfectly at anything we can predict, but that only humans can figure out what to do when a situation arises that we cannot predict. Right, Don?
Right. Machines, I think that AI is overrated when people think of it as some big, all-thinking, conscious entity. We're still generations away from in a machine that's actually going to, have any sort of self-awareness, if ever. But I'll give just a quick example I sometimes use in my presentations. Do you enjoy scary movies? Raise your hand if you enjoy scary movies, everybody. In the book Dataclysm, Christian Rudder, the founder of OkCupid, wrote this book Dataclysm, and he said, "Do you enjoy scary movies?" is the single most predictive question of the millions of interviews he's done with couples and the hundreds of thousands of couples who are still together. That is the single most predictive question for relationship longevity.
And what's the right answer? Please, we're on pins and needles.
Either both do or both don't, I think. But he didn't say, but that's, the thing is, why?
Okay, why?
Nobody knows why. That's the point. Nobody knows why. The machine doesn't know why. It just knows what. Or consider Synovest. Synovest does software that for banks and other lending, that they can make loans to people who are less creditworthy, and Finovest, and they use AI to sort through all the loan applications. What Finovest has found is that when a person fills out the loan application in all caps, they tend to be less creditworthy. Why?
Ego.
Again, no one knows. The point is that that's not the way reasoning happens. Reasoning happens in storytelling. That's how we tell stories. That's why there's a beginning and an end and a middle that has a little bit of drama. And you can remember a story, but you're not going to remember statistics or numbers and so forth. You've heard the expression correlation is not causation. That expression was created by the statistics industry. Specifically, there was one of the fathers of modern statistics was very, very careful to avoid the idea that causation was implied in these correlations. The rooster crowing in the morning is correlated with the sun coming up, but the rooster doesn't cause the sun to come up. The sun causes the rooster to crow. And
Julia's agreeing with you at this moment.
Julia, are you there?
That's right, and many others like it. Right. And that's why you don't have to buy a lottery ticket to enjoy planning what you're going to do with the money, because you have just as much chance with. Never mind.
I was going to make a point. I'm sorry. These days, mathematicians and logicians are coming up with a new form of causal reasoning. Causal reasoning meaning if you do this, this is more likely to happen. If you do this, this is more likely to happen. That kind of causal reasoning requires its own notation and so forth. But even if you program that, causal reasoning requires you to make prior assumptions about what's likely to happen in the absence. What's the in the absence of doing this, what would happen? These days, what you come out with is a Bayesian logic, so that what is the likelihood that a customer will leave, given that they have complained, okay, as an example. I think we're making a lot of progress there, but fundamentally, it's still, no matter how good the computer is, it still needs a human being to put in the priors, or the prior likelihoods, because it can't reason from zero. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that probably talks to the fact that technology and automation may replace the mundane stuff, but we have to still apply empathy and real intelligence. So that came from Michael Taylor, but there's a great book, Best Foot Forward, that was in Gosh publication back when you were writing these first books that said the same thing, is if you can automate all of the what we call low calorie information, you can then apply their things that need real help to humans. It probably won't go away.
You know, and when you're mentioning storytelling, it reminds me that that's why we've seen such a rise in all of the customer experience way of thinking about things, and also customer experience journey mapping.
Yeah.
The perfect point for us to mention SuiteCX, who's sponsoring this, whatever this is, and that's what you folks are doing. You'll just take a minute, Valerie, to let you speak about SuiteCX. Full disclosure, Don and I are both on the board.
Well, and storytelling is like, it's the way any customer-oriented company has to approach things. They have to imagine what it is like to be the customer.
Correct. That's right.
And then they do that. And interestingly, I think one of the predictions we ought to make has to do with the way AI and machine learning and other sophisticated computer tools integrate with the human worker in the future. We talked about, AI isn't just taking jobs. Of course, it's taking jobs. The steam shovel took jobs. Okay, the assembly line took jobs. Every type of progress replaces labor. But ultimately, AI can empower workers who interact with customers to not have to handle the routine things. But what's left is going to be the more difficult issues, the issues that require empathy or wisdom or creativity or judgment to solve. And companies have a hard time dealing with that because they've built organizations, big corporations that are bureaucratic organized and top-down managed, and rules and regulations, and they run like a computer would run. They don't run like a human mind would run. And it's going to be a difficult issue. I think it's going to be a difficult issue for companies.
It also brings us to another prediction, and it's one that we really ended up making sort of between then and now, and that is realizing that all of the predictions we made 30 years ago really come down to the ability of customers and companies to trust each other. Oh, and by the way, for employees to trust their companies, and for it's a three-way trust circle. And so we've written a book and then revised it on trust.
Right.
And I think that we will continue to see that rise. In fact, I attended a DMC&Y luncheon last week where Bruce Beagle was talking from the Winterberry Group. And he was talking basically about marketing spending across channels and how it's all moving to digital and other things that were good to see but aren't surprising. And he said that this is why we're going to see trust rise as a whole big topic, as an important area, a business strategy, not marketing strategy, across businesses. So that sounds like music to our ears, considering that we've been working on this stuff for a while. It also means that we have to think in terms of what is it about trust that makes it so important. We have a friend named David Allison who's working, has a company named Value Graphics, and he basically is trying to get understanding for companies of which values their customers have. The number one, of course, across all areas of the world is family. But near the top in every case is some element of trust, not necessarily, since customers are allowed to vocalize and articulate their own terms, it doesn't always come out as the word trust, but it nearly always comes out as one of our components of trust. So I think we're going to see a lot more in that.
Yeah. And I think,
how about like blockchain and that's like the technology
insurance
that enforces trust in businesses.
Right. That's right. That's blockchain.
Blockchain will definitely be a player in the trust of the future, digital trust. And I think you'll see blockchain technology revolutionizing how people swap information. I think blockchain could eventually solve or go towards solving the privacy crisis, because blockchain, it's theoretically possible for a blockchain app of some kind to track whatever personal information I let go for myself. You know, what Shoshana Zuboff in the Surveillance Capitalist book calls your data exhaust. You know, blockchain could actually own that data exhaust in a funny way. I think that's a potential I think another potential solution to privacy protection would be to revise Section 230 of the Telecommunications Decency Act from the 1990s, which basically it says that a social media company or other internet company is not a publisher if it's just repurposing other, you know, its users' posts. It's more like a newsstand. If a newspaper comes out with a libelous story, I can sue the newspaper for libel, but I can't sue the news vendor. So what Section 230 says is that it's really the news, the internet companies and news vendors. I think if you just said that any company that makes money by selling customers data exhaust should be considered a publisher, that would dramatically improve the quality of social media. And so it would increase their costs for sure, but they can afford that. And I think as a species, the human race is going higher and higher up the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And hey, I got a smartphone now. I can do all the stuff I need. I can tell Alexa to order more diapers for my kid. I can do what but now I'm worried more about privacy. Sorry?
I said, you mean your grandchildren? Please continue.
My grandchildren. All right.
So you just.
That's right. And it also means, I mean, right, I can sit right here and turn my husband's hearing aids up and down. So it's
God.
gaslighting a little bit, but no, I don't know how to do that.
So let's just to close, talk a little bit about short-term versus long-term. What do you think about, where things are speeding up so fast? What is long-term anymore?
Long-term is still as long as it used to be. Companies, however, their attention spans are shorter and shorter, but their analysis is better and better. And I think that it's only a matter of time before the analysis catches up with the fact that such short-termism on the part of most businesses is destructive. We say you think of every customer as a little bundle of cash flow with a memory, okay? And it's the customer's memory that links your short-term revenue to your long-term shareholder value. That's the basic link. And I think more companies are beginning to realize it. There's still decades of consulting out there for everybody on the call, by the way. I think. Thank
heavens. But here's the thing: is that how soon will any leadership at a company realize that there is more money to be made from by taking every customer you have and making the most money you can from each one of them, instead of doing whatever you need to do to make the most money this quarter? And do you care? And by the way, we had a question earlier, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who asked it, but the question was, do we have IDIC trademarked? And the answer is yes and no. Yeah, here's this. This is the 3rd edition of the textbook, Managing Customer Experience and Relationships by, of course, Peppers and Rogers. But this is important because this book right here has, up until, was it 4 years ago, whatever year it was, 2016, maybe 17, until then, practically every term and every idea and every big idea that we had. And I would suggest that you get it and keep it on your shelf, because Don and I own the copyright for this book. So everything that's in it is ours, is ours. Among us here.
And we're working on a 4th edition right now.
And we're working on
a 4th edition.
I haven't forgotten, believe me. So we do. But the 4th edition will be a much smaller book, and it will not include everything. Right. It's written for modern professors who do things in little pieces. So So you may want to just hang on to the third edition, and before long you'll be able to get it really cheap. So you can do that. But
So from a technology or information-based, Bill Hurley asked, do you see anything profound coming out long-term from the pandemic?
Oh, definitely. And by the way, we had a 40% increase, okay, in e-commerce in the first 3 months of the COVID crisis. That's basically 10 years worth of progress in that first 3 months, according to McKinsey. And that genie is not going to go back in the bottle. Do you think people really want to go back to work? Do I want to go back to commuting 45 minutes a day in heavy traffic to my office if I can do my job from home? I think you're going to have a lot of changes, and basically, I think it does any organic entity, including an economy. It does a lot of good to have an occasional stress test. Okay, and I think the COVID crisis has been a great stress test for the world economy.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't call it completely good news, but it is something that changes a lot of things. It will profoundly change education in the long run. It will profoundly change the way we think of space. So all that space that white collar workers don't want to go back to because they don't need to do the commute and the clothes. Oh, that's bad for Brooks Brothers, but it's good for everybody else. A lot of those, what's going to happen to all that space? Well, maybe it can become a living space for bigger families who right now are shut up in 1 and 2 bedroom apartments where if they get sick, if one of them gets sick, there's no place to hide. There's no place to hide the others. And the list goes on and on and on about how profoundly we'll see a lot of industries change, and not just ours.
Cool. Any other questions from anybody as we go forward here?
I wish we were all together.
I know.
It was really great seeing everybody. Okay, everybody, it was really, really great. Thanks for turning out. This is like old home week. It was wonderful.
I live in Connecticut now too, so I see some of you that are, I guess, still in Connecticut, and maybe we could all get together. And
I'm out here in California, where we rent. I have a view of the golf course here, but we're renting. And, 4 years ago, we moved out here. Pam wanted to buy, and I said, the prices are just too high out here. They can't stay high. And guess what? With all the .com people and from Google to Apple moving to Austin and working out of their homes in Ski Valley or whatever, housing prices are going to start declining here too, at least in some areas.
And Houston will be the largest city in the country in possibly 10 years, but certainly fairly soon.
What will be?
Houston.
Houston's
going to be the most populous city in the country.
Interesting.
So we're seeing a lot. We're going to see a lot of changes, but maybe we can all meet in Kansas City or something. But
we've all just met. We've all just met virtually.
I know. But
we don't have to be there. We're all there. Not.